All right, so we are here. Which day is today? Seriously, what day is today? Tuesday? Yes, Tuesday. God. It's funny, I was just listening before we started to Morrissey, Every Day is Like Sunday. That's kind of the way I've been feeling over the last month or two. So here on Tuesday, we're just having our morning tailgate meeting, and Sarah had mentioned that she was having trouble laying out her one by one, partially because she doesn't quite have the right measuring tools. And I purposely on the syllabus said, here's what's minimally required to just kind of get by. Here's what's recommended, and then here's what the pros have. And the minimal that you can work with is going to make your life more complicated, right? So the less of the professional tools that you're working with, the more that you're going to struggle with getting everything right? If you have a crappy shovel, if you have the wrong size trowel, it will make things more complicated. So you, it sounds like, have only one metric ruling stick, and then you have multiple with inches. Okay.
Correct.
So one of the workarounds you could do for our project, you would just have to kind of translate everything that I talk about from metric into English. You could pretend you're on an historic American property, and in which case on historic American properties, we do work in feet. All right, but we tend to work in, remember, that weird thing called engineering scale, which is tenths of feet rather than inches. But you could work with in feet and inches. All right, it's just a little bit more complicated. And what you would need to do is do the math. Since I'm not a historic archaeologist, I tend not to have this one in my head. But what would it be? It'd be a three. You would dig a 3 foot by 3 foot, which is slightly smaller than a 1 meter by 1 meter, right? You're talking about a yard by a yard. So that's the standard sized test unit if you're working in feet, is 3 feet by 3 feet. So then you've got a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So you got 3 times 3 is 9, plus 3 times 3 is 9. You got 18. What's the square root of 18? Yeah, everybody whip out your phone. What is the square root of 18? Who's going to get it first? I don't even know where that button is on my.
And I got 4.246626, something like that.
All right, well, we need it pretty. See, that's the problem. You're going to get this point, right? Then it's a fraction. And what does that mean in inches, right? So that's why your engineering scale is a little bit better. I apologize. Can you give that to me again? I still can't find the square root button on my.
It's 4.242640.
Okay. So if you can figure out what that point is, a fraction of a foot, that point doesn't mean inches, right? That 4 point something, those points aren't inches, they're fractions of a foot. So you would need to then, and what we do, every archaeologist who works on weird sites that have different numbering systems, where you might be working in feet and then you might work somewhere else, take your ruler, do the math while you are inside and calm and nothing's bothering you, and mark your rulers with a Sharpie.
I thought about that. Yeah. I've just taken my metric and like measuring out to that, but I just didn't do that yet. But that's what I thought of doing.
Yeah. So then you mark the common hypotenuse for whatever yours would be. Again, like I said, I don't really need to do that. I don't really need to do that when I'm working in metric, because that just sticks in my head. I've 1.424, but the once I start working outside of my comfort zone, then absolutely, I'll use any type of cheat sheet. I'll have that hypotenuse written down somewhere. I'll mark it on a ruler, whatever you can do. I hope that helps, but I do recommend making those calculations and marking your rulers like at a calm inside place, not where you're frustrated right next to the unit. You know, especially if it's hot and you're tired, that you don't make smart I don't make smart mathematical calculations when I'm in that mood. All right, so it is 9:06. So any other questions that have come up in the last 24 hours for our tailgate meeting here?
No questions. I did my solution to problems she was having, or I have similar problems with one of the stakes. I just took a string with a metal, something to hook onto the stakes or the nails.
Sure.
Measured it out to a meter, and then I could swing that anywhere I needed to. Then I could just use my one accurate meter or centimeter tape to measure out the more
that's
stuff with the 1.14.
Yeah, that's real smart. Make some 1 meter straight thing, and then that'll be your 1 meter. It could be string. I wouldn't recommend just sticks and stuff. When working, we have some Mayanists here working in the jungle. You actually might make a switch out of things and use. It's a long story. I've mapped entire sites using just poles and stuff, but you can create your own measuring sticks. It's a smart way to do it. All right. Well, I have if you look at our syllabus, I'm going to share my screen here. If you look at our syllabus, we are, let me make this a little bigger. So we're in this section where we are talking about laying out a test unit and moving into starting our test excavations. But based on the questions I got yesterday from you all, I realized that transition from going from shovel test pits to the 1x1s kind of left you wondering, how do we choose where to put our 1x1s? What really wraps up the STP survey and what moves us into the test unit phase? And so I want to talk about that a little bit. I did so outside, videotaped that, and I'm going to have you watch that now and then come back and we'll talk more about this transition from phase 1 STPs to phase 2 test units. Okay, so we've got in our course documents, week 3, this one is called lesson STP Radials, or ending a phase 1. Okay, so check that out. Meet me back here and we'll chat on the flip side.
Every 5 meters? Are they every 15 meters?
Okay. All right. So STP is really the technique, right? Shovel test pit. A pit a little bit bigger than your shovel. The intervals that are used vary depending on the purpose. So when you're doing an entire landscape, you try and kind of, you try and find the biggest interval that would still find what you are looking for. And so you try and maximize distance between your STPs, because it takes a lot of work, you know, to put people digging across an entire landscape. So 15 meters apart tends to be your standard phase one. I have been in states that allow a 20-meter interval. That's a little large for me. 15 is pretty standard. But again, the concept is that you're looking for sites at that point. The 5-meter intervals are more appropriate when you're already on site. The 5-meter intervals are appropriate either in your phase one when you're doing radials, right? Your phase one, you're doing your every 15, you hit a positive, you do your radials around it. That's one reason to do 5-meter intervals. And the other reason would be, actually, you already know you're on a site, and you design your sampling because you're not just looking for, is there a site here? You're looking for things like maybe a house or a privy or a well. And you are, let me give you an example. Belgrove Plantation, I've been spending the last 2-3 summers excavating there. And we put in STPs across the entire landscape. I'm trying to remember, I believe that was at, yeah, 50-foot intervals, so it's 15-meter. But then we shrunk it down because we wanted to find a house, and we knew that the house would be about 12 meters in diameter. And so our biggest thing we wanted to find was 12 meters. So we didn't want to, I'm sorry, it was 12 feet across. And we're on a foot site, right? So we wanted to see how big, so we shrunk our interval down to make sure we wouldn't miss something of that size. So it's really, you're not going to end up making this decision, honestly, for a few years. Somebody's going to tell you how many, what your interval is going to be as a field tech. But I'm giving you the background of how everybody makes these choices. So your big intervals are for covering a lot of area and finding out whether or not a site is there. And your shorter intervals are when you're already on site and you're trying to find areas of activity. Does that make sense? And so very commonly on your phase one, you would have a mix of them where you'd be doing one every 15, just all through the forest, one every 15, and it's gonna be, oh my God, it gets so boring. You're digging an empty hole and you find nothing. And you fill it back in and you know, machete your way through another 15 meters, and then you dig another hole and there's nothing in it, and then you fill it back in, and you do that for like, you know, a few days, maybe a week, and then you hit something. And when you hit that one, then in your case, you'll be a field tech, but in my case, as a crew chief, I would tell people, okay, if you get a positive on this one, we are doing radials, we are doing brackets. So if you guys hit a positive, yell out to everybody, because maybe we'll bring the team together and quick knock out those 5-meter radials around any positive that we get. And then once we chase out whatever activity area you found, everybody would go back to their lines and continue on with our 15-meter intervals. That's usually the way it's done. I have been on projects where we just do our 15-meter intervals across the entire landscape, come back, and then we plot them all out. and we see which areas might we want to go back and do some of these radials or bracketing into. So really, I'm teaching you this semester the techniques behind the digging and the thought process that goes into why you're putting each unit where it is. That's a little advanced. I'm giving you a preview of what you would eventually learn once you become more of a crew chief. So you really won't have to worry about these decisions much, but I think it's smart for every archaeologist to know why they're doing what they're doing. So that's why I'm teaching it this way. So, and we're doing it in our own backyard, so we can't really mess up a real archaeological site, right? That's kind of the other point of all of this, is that none of us are really on some majorly historic site that we can really fuck up, right? So, my Ariel's got something to say about that. I don't know. So the point today, and I feel like everybody's in slightly different points right now, and I'm catching up on your videos. I think today should be used for catch up. Don't open your 1x1s yet if you have one laid out. If you haven't laid one out, go ahead and practice that. If you have a backyard that has room for multiple STPs, and I know many of you that's not true, you only have room for a couple STPs. But if you have room for more, practice the activity of it. So if you have room for doing one every 5 meters, and you're just gonna, it would be kind of Swiss cheesing your backyard, but whatever, right? As long as you're allowed to and it's okay with you, do it, practice it. Do a few more STPs. If you feel like you have that practice down, then practice laying out your 1x1. Today is catch-up day, and then tomorrow, so by tomorrow, have your 1x1 laid out, okay, if you have not done so already. And then we will start with the kind of phase 2 excavations of test units. Sound good? Questions, thoughts about the video or anything you saw or anything we've been talking about?
I had one more question, if that's
Oh,
okay.
yes, you did. Yeah.
Cool. So you sort of mentioned how you thought there was possibly a feature or a site in one corner, but you talked about like how it wasn't part of the maybe I might have misunderstood, but it wasn't part of the spacing. It wasn't going to fit in. So can you not dig that in a normal CRM situation? Like you just have to ignore it if it doesn't fall in?
That is a great question. You were really paying attention. That's so there is something in this what we call archaeological research design. And what we're trying to do is make sure by using statistical sampling that we don't miss any areas just because our super smart brains would look at it and say, I don't think there's anything there, so I'm not going to dig it. So by doing a rigid every 15 meters, whether you like that spot or not, you're forced to test both in areas of high probability and low probability. Because it's just as important to find out where artifacts are not as where they are. So we're doing that as a rigorous sample. But then there are going to be times where you literally walk over something that you know should be tested, and it's in between your intervals. There's, you're 15 meters back that way and 15 meters back that way. There's a hole, but walking over this, you see right there that you should test this. You can do what we'll call opportunistic sampling. You absolutely can. You, as the archaeologist, can make the decision to put in an extra STP because you feel like the intervals missed something. But what that does is, if you're going to do any rigorous statistical sampling with your data afterwards, those of you who are into stats, if you've ever used programs like Surfer or something like that to do a plot distribution of your artifacts, if you're putting all this stuff into GIS, depending upon the way you're doing your statistics, you may or may not want to include that opportunistic test in your statistical analysis of the site. That's some advanced level shit for you, but the concept is yes, you can test opportunistically, but those are kind of done ad hoc as you see them, and they're not always included in any statistical analyses later because they don't fall into the research design. If you take a lot of archaeological method and theory classes, in the 1960s, archaeologists went through this attempt to become more scientific rather than just going through the jungles trying to find stuff. And so we started using statistical sampling to take some of our biases out of it. Because too often archaeologists were only going in, finding the cool stuff, only excavating the cool stuff, and kind of forgetting about the more interesting parts of daily life. For instance, if you're a Maya archaeologist, we were only excavating the royal palaces and we were ignoring the outskirts of the cities where all the people lived. And on a farmstead, you might work mostly around the structure. But what's just as important might be the field edge where they tossed all their trash. And so you're going to want to test the whole landscape so you get a full, more complete view of the entire, we call it landscape archaeology, actually. And so we want to do both landscape archaeology and what's also called non-site archaeology, meaning testing everywhere, whether or not you think there's a site there. It keeps us from putting too much of our personal bias into our research design. And then we can come in and we can do the extra stuff, right? As long as we do the statistical sampling right, we can always do more. But you shouldn't only dig where you think the cool stuff is. Other questions? So yeah, I actually, it may not be even this season, but I'm probably gonna put a test unit, not just a shovel test, but I'm probably gonna put a test unit up by that corner because it's flat. The grass doesn't grow there right. A little bit of a crop mark and almost rectangular, and it's right at the corner of my fence. So that's just a really good place for an outbuilding to be. Possibly not even an outbuilding. They did have 2 house slaves, enslaved African Americans on this property, and we don't know where they lived. They could have just lived in the barn in the Shenandoah Valley. They didn't always have separate housing for their enslaved peoples, but I have some letters written home from the Civil War of the owner of the property talking about his Sam, this guy Sam, who was enslaved here on our property. And it seemed to be that Sam was a bit of a part of the family, even though still an enslaved person. And I would wager there is some housing for him on this property somewhere. So I'm keeping my eyes open for some other structure. There are too few structures on my property still standing. There had to have been so many more. Other questions? Okay, well, today is catch-up day. You go do what you need to do. Go to Blackboard, check your assignment lists, make sure that you've uploaded a video of anything you needed to. And again, it's if you can do more STPs, now's the time to get that practice in, because we're going to be moving on to our 1x1s, and this is kind of ending our phase 1 section of the class and moving on to our phase 2. Quite appropriately, about halfway through the class. We're in week 3, right? So people starting to feel like this is almost like a job now. Yeah, yep. Give it 25 years, it'll really feel like a job at some point. So, but it's an enjoyable job. You get outside, you see nature, get to some black rat snakes and some baby deer. All right. Well, everybody, you can sign off. I will leave this open, and I'm going to be actually looking through some of your Blackboard submissions. So feel free to hit me up on this Zoom channel. And then otherwise, I will see you tomorrow. Have your 1x1 laid out.
Hey, I'm trying to upload the video from my, but I spent like 3 hours yesterday trying to upload it, and it like won't. I don't know, just a little. It's slightly bigger than my other, and since I don't have Wi-Fi,
That's what I'm wondering. So
I'll
you're
try it, but is there another option to get it to you if I can't get it through YouTube?
so yeah. Let's explore that. Are you in such a remote area that there's not a McDonald's nearby?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it takes like 45 minutes to drive into town.
Okay.
Although I actually might be going into town today anyways, so I could try to upload it there when I do go.
Until we paid extra for my DSL to be kind of tinkered with, I was having a hell of a time here at my house, and I just drove over to McDonald's. But if you don't have a McDonald's nearby,
7 miles up a dirt road.
are you recording on your phone?
Yeah.
Okay, check your phone to see what resolution you are recording at.
Okay.
This won't solve your problem for today because you've already recorded this, but you can drop the resolution down to 720p instead of 1080p, and that's half the pixels.
Okay.
That'll shrink the file size quite a lot.
All right. We are trying to get some Wi-Fi here. It might come in this week. We don't know yet.
Okay.
So,
it's kind of like, what's that movie? I forget the line. It's like, oh yeah, well the train's coming by through any day now. Yeah, they're building the tracks now.
Right. All right. Cool.
Well, let me know if I can help. I don't know of another solution other than YouTube. The other thing, you could in Zoom, if you log on with your phone to Zoom. I don't know if you can do it on your phone. Can you? All right, let me think this through. Take your video file, put it on your laptop. You got a laptop, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Put the video file on your laptop, and then you would launch Zoom, and then you would press record my screen and record my screen and share my screen, and then press play.
But can I do that? Like, do I have to do that when we're in a session, or can I do it?
You can create a session. And anybody with a free version of Zoom, which I assume you have the free version, you can create your own session that can last up to 40 minutes.
Okay.
It will cut you off after 40 minutes. But if you launch it and then you hit record and share screen, it will create a much more compressed version. And you can only do so many of these because with the free version, you don't have a lot of server space for them. You can, in a pinch, record it to their server. And so it's actually uploaded to Zoom. So look, maybe Google a couple of ways to do that with Zoom or something. That might be a workaround for you, or just try it out.
Okay. I've been able to get the other videos to upload, but
Yeah, I saw that you've definitely been uploading. So if once they get it to a certain length, though, yeah.
All right. Well, I'll try in town today first because I think I'm taking a trip in there, and then do the Zoom thing next if I can't get it.
All right. Well, let me know if I can help.
Yep. Thank you. All right. See ya.
Am I still recording here?